Welcome to Public Power Underground, Northwest Public Power infotainment that began as awkward forced fun time for the power department 41 weeks ago, when we altered our work arrangements at the start of an ongoing pandemic. Today's show is presented without commercial interruption by our presenting sponsor, Plug Pass. If you're curious about our subscription-based electric vehicle charging program, call, email, or text Paul and he will inundate you with information. On today's show, we'll get an update on Northwest power markets on Arin's Report, check out the news on Public Power Desktop, and we're introducing a new segment we like to call Mailbag with Marc, where we answer viewer questions. I'm your host, Brian Fawcett, and today we have a special executive guest, the former DJ of KHUG, 1500 AM in Phoenix, Oregon, the general manager of Clatskanie PUD, and our boss, Marc Farmer. Welcome to Public Power Underground, Marc.
Thank you. This is, of all honors I've ever had throughout my life, this is the highest.
I have one question in regards to this. Is it KHUG or KHUG? I just went with KHUG because
KHUG. It was KHUG Radio. Yeah, right. It was a country western station.
Perfect.
Very nice.
Okay, we're also joined by the star of Arin Reports and co-star of Public Power Underground, financial analyst Arin Guillory. Good afternoon, Arin.
Afternoon, Fawcett. Thanks for the intro. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Our other co-star of Public Power Underground, the coding wizard of R and Python, current power analyst Ian Bledsoe. Thanks for being here, Ian.
No problem.
Lastly, the creator of this podcast, our fearless leader, Paul. How are you doing this week, Paul?
Doing okay, Brian. On Friday, Notre Dame will be in the semifinals of the college football playoff. Regardless of the outcome, I'm going to be insufferable next week. I will either be despondent or exuberant. So it's going to be an interesting week next week.
Cool. Let's take a minute to add this to our notes for next week.
You're just going to play the line, so if you lose by less than 20, you're happy, or?
I wish I could control my emotions that much. I wish I could have any rational control over my emotions. It doesn't matter. I don't know why I'm invested in this outcome of this game.
Well, it's kind of like nobody expects you to win, so not a lot of pressure, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to be insufferable if we win. The entire content of next week's Public Power Underground will be dedicated to Notre Dame football.
Well, let's not leave out the Ducks, though, Paul, because the Ducks are playing in the Fiesta Bowl, so.
We're going to have to edit this out, this part right here. I read somewhere online that this is the worst team to ever participate in a Fiesta Bowl, but I haven't verified that.
You're the one that typed that to me in a text. What do you mean you read that?
Maybe that's where it was.
It's all coming out. The power department will be taking another short week next week, too.
Yeah. All right, we better move on before we get too far off track here. We're starting this week checking in on power market indicators in the Northwest with our first segment, Arin Reports.
All right, sounds good, Fawcett. Here we go. This is Arin Reports, built to take a few minutes to cover Northwest market indicators for December 30th, 2020. I'm Arin Guillory, and I've got your market update for the week. April-September flows, the Dows are expected to be 88,642, a 426 dip from last week compared to a 92,704 30-year average, putting the anomaly at 96. Outflow and elevation data for the Dalles and Grand Coulee Dam are a little stale this week, so we'll move right along to Mid-Sea Power, which settled at night around 26.85. Daylight brought 29.93, high 40.75, low 21. August Power at Mid-Sea went down to 65.55 today compared to 66.30 last time reported on Public Power Underground. Henry Hub January futures opened at 2.467 on Tuesday, and August opened at 2.628. Sumas Gas in August closed at a 25-cent discount to Henry Hub. Translation: Mid-Sea August Power is priced at a 27 to 28,000 heat rate, and this rate is on fire. In bond markets, One Washington PUD recently issued 2 bonds at a total of $23,495 million, a 20-year note with an average interest rates of 4.1% and yields of 173 bips, and a 5-year taxable borrowing at average interest rates of 0.66, that's 0.66%, and yields of 66 bips. The CPC maintained the ONI of negative 1.2 for September, October, November, with most recent SST departures at negative 0.9 for Nino 3.4 index, and currently predicts a 95% chance. Again, La Nina will continue through winter 2021. Other sources report a maintained negative 1.06 current index. Spending a beat at Bonneville's Balancing Authority. Peak load this past week hit 8,500 on December 28th at 8:45 in the a.m. Corresponding hydrogen was 11 grand. Wind gen didn't contribute much at 4 megs. And conventional thermal units and nuclear gen sat at about 1 grand to 1,100 for the same interval. Saturday, 32 steelhead passed through the Lower Granite Dam, a swim up from last Sunday at 18. Temp in the region is predicted to land right in the normal range, while precipitation in the region has a 50 to 60% chance of being above average in the 6 to 10 day outlook, with a shift anticipated to a 33 to 50% chance of being above average in the most recent 1 month outlook for NOAA. And that's all we've got for this update. Back to you, Brian.
Thanks for the report, Arin. And now our weekly walk through Northwest Public Power and Public Power adjacent news in a segment we like to call Public Power Desktop. This week, we start off across the Pacific, where the Chinese have continued to expand their weather modification program, which uses techniques like cloud seeding to alter precipitation patterns. It isn't the technology that's alarming to its neighbors, it's the scale of the undertaking. The recent expansion would mean a program to cover an area of at least 2.1 million square miles, an area more than 1.5 times the size of India. This attempt to hydro-engineer the sky could ease shortages in the dry north of China, but may exacerbate problems in Southeast Asia and India.
So I went a little bit deeper because I knew Idaho Power does some cloud seeding programs. And so I went to their webpage and I found this cool little link to a North American Weather Modification Council. I was curious, like the full scale. They have this really cool map. And then for context, I was like, well, how many square miles is the United States? And it's like 4 million square miles. So this is like, their program is like if you had a weather modification program for the entirety of the Western United States.
And not just the small spots in the Western.
This is what we currently do. But yeah, that would be if this whole area, if all of this were the entire area were under a program like this.
Wow.
Massive.
And it's clearly a zero-sum game. You're taking that water from wherever else it would have fallen, if not for your cloud seeding program, right?
So at the scale that China is doing, I think that would be a true statement. But for like what Idaho Power, Idaho Power says on their website that that's not the case. Actually, it may have been in this article.
I think it was in the other article. It basically causes it to fall as snow instead of rain, potentially, if they can do it at the right time.
Right.
But regardless, like at the scale they're doing it, it probably does end up being a zero-sum game.
Yeah, they talked about shifting it from basin, like a huge river basin, to a different basin. And I found this article to be really interesting, not just because I'm the one who posted it, but there's a whole lot of other things to consider from a moral standpoint and a weaponry standpoint that is concerning, in my opinion. I think we're a ways off from that, but still somewhat scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wars with bullets are a thing of the past, and now we have other wars.
Yeah, I'm curious to look more into the science, though. I would say it seemed like a lot of articles, because this was a very curious, I'm glad that you posted this, Fawcett. It led to a lot of rabbit holes in a way, just that there seems to be some science or studies that have been conducted that seem to pose the idea that it's at least fairly complicated to determine what impact, if any, there really is here, unless it's unless like they reference times with like Olympics or something like that, avoiding potential rain, shooting the silver iodide into the clouds and then seeing snowfall later. But I don't know, the science is interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking about that aspect too. Actually trying to control the moisture as snow or something else to increase hydro generation seemed like it was maybe not, the science didn't really prove it out to be a huge change, but Idaho Power is saying something like 5 to 15%. But the other part was that it was pretty clearly articulated that China has used it to clear the skies, literally, in Beijing. And that part, to me, I don't know that that has much of a benefit other than aesthetics, but it obviously works.
Yeah.
Included in Division AA of the end-of-year omnibus legislation is the passage of the Water Resources Development Act of 2020. Section 218 of that act enumerates a provision that PPC staff have been advocating as a means to improve the competitiveness of the federal Columbia River power system. Provision directs the Army Corps to initiate a 2-year study on deauthorizing commercial power at Cougar and Detroit Dams in the Willamette Valley. To provide his insights, we invited Kurt Miller, Executive Director of Northwest River Partners, back and on to Public Power Underground.
Hi, Kurt. Welcome back to Public Power Underground.
Oh, Paul, I am so honored to be here. My goal is really to be the Alec Baldwin of PPU, to make as many return visits as possible. So thanks so much for having me today.
So I'll have to put up on my whiteboard, I'll put a check for every time Kurt has been out so we can keep track, right? So you can hold the record.
Right.
And I'll get you a belt.
Yeah,
like
so I was, if I'm not mistaken, oh yeah, the I love the Aaron Rodgers discount double check sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. By the way, I grew up on professional wrestling. Like my dad used to take me to the wrestling matches in Portland and in Salem and everything. I am all about that. I love that stuff.
That was a niche in my childhood that I did not really dive into. Kind of regret it because there's a lot of pop culture wrestling. It seems like just the type of thing I would have loved.
You would have loved it. Oh my gosh, this is the greatest stuff. And you know, I actually got an autograph of one of my very favorite wrestlers, Ed Wiskowski, at the Oregon State Fair, and he was so nice. But then, you know, his stage persona was a villain, so it was really cool to see how friendly he was behind the scenes. Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah, got to be the heel. That's my role. I'll be the heel in this discussion.
Okay, absolutely.
Included in the end-of-year omnibus legislation is this provision directing the Army Corps of Engineers to initiate a 2-year study on deauthorizing these commercial dams, Cougar and Detroit Dams in the Willamette Valley. So deauthorization of power. PPC was advocating for it, has been advocating for it for a while. When we had you on to talk more broadly about dams in the region and specifically Snake River dams, you made this distinction around productive dams and non-productive dams. So I wanted to have you back on to get your insights on this specific provision and how we should feel about it within that context of conversations.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, thank you, Paul. I take my being here meant that no one from PPC was available in the week between Christmas and New Year's, and I'm very happy to fill in for those folks. Yeah, absolutely.
Just for clarification, that was not true. You were the first person to ask because I know PPC's perspective. They've shared it. I know their perspective. Absolutely. I don't know your perspective on it.
No, and you actually summarized my perspective really well. Is that you know, we've talked before that, as you mentioned, that we believe that, we support productive hydroelectric dams. And what does that mean? That means the dams that provide real benefit to communities, right? So they, in some cases that could be flood prevention, because obviously that's a real benefit to communities, protecting homes and households and livelihoods. But also a big thing is that we're for, as you know, is hydroelectric, providing clean, affordable hydroelectricity to the region. And that helps us fight climate change. It helps us fight warming oceans and rivers. And we believe that if dams can produce a significant amount of that hydroelectricity, that they really, generally speaking, are productive for society. What we see in the Willamette River dams is that they just don't meet that description. PPC actually recently put out a white paper. It talked about the incremental costs of the lower Snake River dams being about $12 per megawatt hour. And that puts it amongst the cheapest of all of the federal produced hydroelectricity in the region. But on the other side of that are the Willamette River dams, which are much more run of river. I think they have less storage capabilities. And not only that, but they produce power at a much higher cost. And I don't have that number completely off the top of my head, but I think it's closer to like $50 per megawatt hour. So all of a sudden now you've got dams that don't produce very much hydroelectricity, and the hydroelectricity they produce is at a very costly rate compared to BPA's other resources. So for that purpose, they just they're more along the lines in our mind of the Klamath River dams, that those dams just don't produce that much electricity, and those dams don't have any fish passage at all, so they're just blocking the river. So dams like that, there might be reasons that local communities would like to keep them, but from an advocacy perspective, we don't see the reason for them to stay. Now, under the Willamette River dams, all they're talking about is decommissioning the power aspect.
Right.
Those dams are really initially built for flood control, and so I believe those dams would remain in place. But the Corps and others, if they were decommissioned for power, wouldn't have to invest anything in the power supply aspects of that, which would be good.
So one of the things I am focused on in this conversation is the very clear distinctions around productive and unproductive. And it seems like there's a risk of kind of knifing away like what you mean by a productive dam. Well, this isn't economical, so it's not productive. Do you worry in the communication to the public that we're getting very nuanced in what we mean, and that could be in some ways a slippery slope to, oh, well, if it's not economic, like these aren't, then we can deauthorize it. And then you kind of keep going along a trend of chipping away small little projects at a time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't believe as an organization had until this year had really come out to try to make that distinction between productive and non-productive dams. But the reason we felt it was really important is that when we talk to people outside of kind of the power supply world, right, the loyal viewers of Public Power Underground, and we go beyond that to others as well, the thing that we've found is that there isn't a real good understanding of the distinction between dams. So we'll hear often, oh, well, we removed the Elwha River dams and that was doable and it helped all these salmon return, or we removed Condit Dam and, same thing, and all these salmon returned. And what we found is that people just thought of one dam as essentially being the same as all dams. And in the case of those dams that I just mentioned, neither of them had, well, there were two on the Elwha River, but none of those dams had fish passage. So of course, when you remove them, you're going to actually open the river up to salmon returning upstream. But the lower Snake River dams, which so many people kind of try to lump in there, have perhaps the most advanced fish passage infrastructure in the world. And I believe that since 2001, about $1 billion has been invested in the fish passage facilities at the lower Columbia and lower Snake River dams combined. And so you have a much different type of situation there where fish are able to pass both upstream and downstream very well. As a matter of fact, a new technology turbine was just introduced at Ice Harbor Dam, I think in the past year, and it's actually successfully passing 99% of all juvenile smolts downstream, without killing them essentially. So 99% survive, and that's better than spill, right? It actually are surviving at a higher rate than smolts spilled through the spillway. So we want people to understand in their minds that there is a distinction between dams, so that then they can talk about these issues on a more educated basis. So for us, the risk that you might parse it here or there, and that might become tricky, is we feel like that's less of a risk than how people currently conflate all dams as being the same.
So instead of worrying about the parsing, it's more about we need to move the conversation through education. So we're moving it forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Educating people on what an economic dam looks like, on the difference between dams with fish passage and dams with storage and all of these different components. So it's an education as a path forward, not really the concern about parsing different types of productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the case with dams, we need more nuance, not less.
Got it.
And that's how we really feel about it. And we also do feel strongly, though, that certain dams, should be removed. I mean, there's no reason to have a dam sitting there without fish passage that doesn't provide service to communities. Maybe the reason it's still there is because it would be costly to tear down. I'm not trying to dismiss that, but my point is that those dams shouldn't be necessarily defended as valuable. They're not. And so, as part of the integrity of what we want to achieve, which is healthy salmon populations and a clean, affordable energy future, we have to be able to understand the distinctions.
Yeah, so dams aren't good in their own right. They aren't their own purpose. They're good for the purposes they serve, for clean energy, storage, and flood control. Those are really good purposes that are valuable to communities. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Kurt, for stopping back in. We'll get some check marks on the board. We'll get you back again.
Yeah,
Make
absolutely.
sure you keep being the top contributor to Public Power Underground outside.
Yeah. If someone else comes on, in the next little bit and matches, please I'll talk about anything, like literally anything. So just kind of throw it out. I'll figure it out.
Okay. So for the wrestling segment that we're going to do later on.
For instance, wrestling segments. I also really enjoyed talking about spreadsheets with you and your team. So, kind of whatever you want to toss out there, I'm in.
Got it. Thank you very much. And we'll have you back again.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Paul.
All right, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory is testing ways to efficiently integrate distributed energy resources by pairing them with demand from smart equipment and appliances using advanced and automated control and coordination. The National Lab is testing these so-called transactive energy systems in Avista's EcoDirect in hopes of being able to substantially reduce the amount of money spent updating and maintaining the nation's energy infrastructure. For more, you can find an article in the consistently wonderful Public Power Daily newsletter.
Consistently wonderful.
In lighter news, Clearing Up dedicated its opinion and perspective section to its annual energy-themed carols. Special thanks to the writers and staff of Clearing Up that do wonderful work. We're all better informed because of the tireless work you put in all year round.
Very much so.
Y'all have to watch
10th month
this
of
because there's a
COVID, the pandemic
super
gave
secret
to
nugget that
me
we're gonna stick in
vaccine
right here. Very
approvals and
excited about it.
endless selection, lots of home baking,
And I also
soaring
think
case
we need
numbers,
to-
COVID
somebody
cost
who's a friend
tracking,
of the underground must
unending
be friends with
dread.
somebody at Clearing Up. We need to be
Disconnect,
friends with
bans,
these people. They are
homeschooling,
hilarious.
too
I
many Zoom
love
calls,
their April
and
1st
constant
newsletter, too.
anxiety.
Tacoma Public Utilities published its 2020 Integrated Resource Plan earlier this year. The IRP covered a 20-year planning horizon and included in scoping key questions on BPA post-2028 contracts. Based on their analysis, Tacoma Power's preferred portfolio is a sliced block product from BPA coupled with the addition of a small amount of demand response. Since analysis of the post-2028 period is of interest to #Public Power Underground, we reached out to their senior analyst, Ahlmahz Negash, who graciously agreed to drop in and talk about their approach to modeling BPA's products and pricing in the next contract.
Hi, Ahlmahz. Welcome to Public Power Underground. Thanks for agreeing to drop in.
Hi, Paul.
How are you dealing with kind of remote work, professional isolation? You got any good coping mechanisms for the rest of us?
I don't think it's any better than anybody else's. I moved my office to my favorite room in the house where I can look outside the window, so I've got a nice view. But that's my coping mechanism. Make sure I'm looking at something nice while I'm working.
Yeah, good view does definitely help. I'm currently looking at a closet. Maybe I should change my arrangements to have a better view.
Yeah, I like that window. What's out behind that window over there?
Yeah, it's too bright, so I have to keep it closed. You recently presented to PNUC System Planning Committee on Tacoma's 2020 IRP. I
Mhm.
found it fascinating. It was a great presentation. I was hoping you could give kind of the high level, the conclusion that you found during that analysis, and then maybe your thoughts around the ways you've modeled it.
Sure. So we had two primary questions that we were asking in this IRP. We did some significant modeling. We revamped our models, and so we were able to ask some pretty hefty contract questions. And so two big questions that we were asking were whether or not we should renew our Columbia Basin Hydro contract, and also what we should do with our Bonneville contract. If they were to offer the same products, should we accept the same product, or should we choose a different product? But just all of the different questions around our long-term contracts.
Right, questions we all have, yeah.
Yeah, and so we looked at a ton of different portfolios, but they kind of grouped into three different categories. We looked at portfolios where we kept our existing slice block product from Bonneville, but of course we would, had some variations within there, diversifying with some renewables, or to add in some demand response, different types of combinations. We also looked at those same combinations of portfolios with a different Bonneville contract. We looked at the block with shaping capacity portfolio resources, and then we also looked at a portfolio of resources where we did not have Bonneville. So it was mostly renewables, a lot of renewables. Yeah. Oh, a lot. And then we looked at, how to firm them up in different ways with improving our, or adding a gas generator, adding some nuclear, demand response, and even a pumped storage hydro at one of our facilities. So we looked at all the different ways that we could add some capacity to that large renewable mix. And at the end of the day, what we found was that the least cost and least risk portfolio was to continue to keep our Bonneville contract as it is, our slice block portfolio. Okay. And to augment it with a little bit of demand response, because through our modeling, we found that we had a little bit of risk in under certain extreme conditions of being resource inadequate. But the least cost way of addressing that was actually to add in some demand response. And so that's what our result was at the end. We recommended 10 megawatts of demand response, preferably by 2024.
So one of the questions I think a lot of us with Bonneville contracts have is there's the product question, and you did some great analysis on product selection, but also trying to understand the cost pressures that may occur during an IRP period. So yours is a 20-year IRP, correct?
Yeah, yes it is.
And that includes a lot of time for costs to get out of control or escalate quickly. So what'd you do to model sensitivities around Bonneville's cost escalation?
Yeah, so for Bonneville's costs, we looked at three different scenarios. In fact, for all of our resources, we had three scenarios around price, a low, medium, and high. And for the case of Bonneville, we assumed that if it would increase, that their cost would increase by 2%, 0%, or decrease by -5%. Those were our three scenarios, and that's real percent increase. And we kind of went with that because we also modeled within our SAM, or our portfolio modeling, how Bonneville prices will adjust according to wholesale revenues. And so given the details of that modeling, we kind of felt that those were appropriate, and we felt like Bonneville, that it's, there are wider ranges of possibilities, but that's what we started off with, was that particular range for right now.
So when you're talking about these different ranges, it's in real dollars, so it's above or below actual inflation. So like a 0% would be regular inflation.
You get flat, just going up at inflation. Yeah.
Going up at inflation. So you included in this a 2% above inflation annual, Annual inflation.
Annual, yes, that is annual.
So those costs did grow quite a bit over this period above other power resources.
It did in the high case. Yes, it did.
And even in those at 2% above inflationary cost increases, you still found it was a competitive resource and kind of a least cost, least risk resource.
Yes, we actually did. And some of that is, of course, it's due to our assumptions about the cost of the other resources. But let's just take, for example, the renewables. There was so much renewable resource that we needed to have in order to replace Bonneville. And with that comes integration charges. And so we'd have to increase our reserves, which would, decrease some of our revenue. And that ends up showing up in the analysis at the end of the day. And so it did show that Bonneville, that resource that we have, is able to keep our prices low.
Yeah, well, this was some great analysis that you performed. The IRP is available on your website, and
it is.
Really appreciate you coming on and being willing to talk about it, and hope you're willing to come back if we have some follow-up. I think this is a topic for a lot of us in the region. I think you're one of the first ones that have kind of done the analysis of that 20 years from now, so really value your insights.
Yeah. And this particular IRP, we only looked at 2 different Bonneville product offerings, but in future IRPs, we'd love to be able to look at other Bonneville product offerings. When we know more about what offerings will be available in the next contract, we're looking forward to modeling that as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ahlmahz. Really appreciate you coming on. I'm hoping I've already signed you up as a friend of the Underground because you were willing to come on and talk about it. Are you willing to come back again as a special guest correspondent?
I sure am.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too, Paul.
Grandma didn't get run over by a reindeer this year because Santa got hung out to dry. A Santa delivering candy canes to a Sacramento suburb crushed his ultralight aircraft into live power lines. Luckily, there were no reindeer, and the pilot wasn't electrocuted, but did have to dangle upside down for an hour while waiting for specially trained elves to rescue him.
We will skip right past the Seattle Times article on the proposed methanol plant in Kalama and the New York Post article about GoDaddy sending employees a fake Christmas bonus email as a phishing test. Even though I found both of those to be very interesting. If you have news you want us to cover on Public Power Desktop, let us know. Up next, we have a brand new segment we are calling the Mailbag with Marc, where listeners send in questions for Marc and others to answer. In a statement about the potential of this new segment, we had to weed through the massive amount of questions this week. Y'all ready for this?
Ooh.
Ready.
All right, question number 1. This one is actually for Ian from Neil the Hiker Hammond. He asks, what's the water year looking like?
Still early in the water year, but water year forecast for the Dalles flows is 96% of normal. There's a decent amount of snowpack. Arin was talking really fast earlier, but I think she said the La Nina index is still going strong, which means colder and wetter than normal. So.
Okay, this one is for the group from John Water Power People H from the McKenzie Valley. He asks, you crash land. I'm going to just preface this by saying this is a really long question. So if you need me to repeat a particular part, just let me know. Anyways, you crash land on a desert island, alone and simply bang, creating all the comforts of life with parts you scavenged from your wrecked plane and coconut shells. After a couple of miserable weeks, you've completely furnished a cave with a bed, a small kitchen and laundry area, a space for exercise, a small home office, a conversation pit with shag carpet, a homemade electric guitar with tube amp, and an iPad that contains every episode of The Simpsons. You're completely set, but you need electricity to power it all. You strip the remaining bits out of your plane to build a power source. You have many choices in the type of energy, but once you commit, you cannot go back. Would you rather power your home with solar, but you spend most of your days scavenging the island and are seldom around to enjoy it? Or power your home with wind, but the wind only blows at night and the light from your gear attracts bugs and animals. Or power your home with a small steam generator fueled by burning airplane seats and coconut husks. It runs whenever you want, but your island will likely miss its carbon emission goals. Unfortunately, all of the plane's batteries caught fire and are still burning, so there'll be little help. Since it's such a long question, no explanation is allowed.
We got Mark's going first, right?
Yeah, it's Mailbag with Marc. You're first.
Wow, talk about a no-win situation. I'll go with the solar.
Yeah.
I'd be carboning up the climate. That would. Sorry.
There's more information. It says that the plane's batteries have been destroyed. But what about the iPad's battery? Can I choose A, charge the iPad all day, and then watch The Simpsons when I get home at night?
Good solution. That's good problem solving, Ian.
That is. I mean, it's an explanation which wasn't allowed, but it
It was a question, not an explanation. Okay.
What do you got, Guillory?
Solar.
So I'm breaking my own rule, which is my prerogative because I'm the editor. I think this shows how jaded that John from the Mackenzie River Valley has become. I don't know what's going on down there. Obviously, I think since Water Power People is his nickname, it's clearly the answer is D, which is tidal power or constructing a generator in some fresh flowing stream.
Clearly.
Which you could use from the salvaged planes turbines.
Exactly. I mean, somehow you're
Already got turbines. The generator.
Okay, sounding so cool, but the rest of us followed the rules.
I mean, I'm somewhat lazy, so I'd rather just go with the steam thing. Although I'm guessing that would probably take some work. So
Wait, I mean, also, is this somewhere in the Marshall Islands we're talking about? You know, one of those low-lying ones where the carbon is actually going to rise sea level above your island? Or is it like, 15 feet above?
Or is it somewhere else in the ocean?
I figured it was an area that needed more carbon for the trees to grow to produce more.
That's good.
coconut
Good
husk.
answer. Good
Yeah.
answer.
Oh, okay, I changed my answer.
Yeah. or the answer could have been, it's biogenic materials, not anthropogenic, so you're fine.
Yeah. All right. Next question. This one's for you, Marc, as well. And it's from Kurt, most prolific guest of Public Power Underground, Miller. He asks, what's the biggest challenge in managing Public Power Underground's on-screen talent?
It's the demands for their contracts. I mean, I've got on one hand, I have Jerry Bruckheimer, who's knocking at the door, wanting to steal my talent, and that's tough. I know that there's a lot of people trying to get the executive producer, Mr. Paul, and I've had to turn away attempts to get at him. I have 24-hour security planted around him. I have signal jammers so that nobody can get to his cell phone without my authorization. Arin, we're grooming her for great things, but I know MSNBC has already contacted us about her stealing her for their show. So that's the problem, is once the exposure to the talent gets out there, the hounds are barking at the door trying to get to our people.
Probably all those agent expenses we try to pass your way too, Marc. I mean, the makeup, the snacks, the high quality water, it's a drain.
It is, and thank goodness, Barb Haas keeps track of the money flow here, and so she's keeping us in line. But once she retires, I don't know, the new person that may come in may be a totally different mindset. So,
Is it true that was trying to get Ian? Did I hear that rumor correctly?
there was.
It's getting cut. Nope.
I did notice.
I didn't want to have to edit this out. I explicitly told you I did not. I wanted to minimize my edits. Okay.
I really could not help myself. I'm sorry. I'm just going to apologize and we'll move on.
Oh my gosh, I had to Google it.
No, not on.
Question for the group from Greg, the Anthony Davis to Alex Swerspen's LeBron James Mendonça. He asks, if BPA were a car, what type of car would it be?
You got to call us out. You got to call us out.
All right, I'll call it. We'll start with Mark.
Wow. I would say they're probably a Prius.
Underpowered but highly efficient.
What's that?
Underpowered but highly efficient.
Pretty much. Yeah, they're a hybrid. Definitely a hybrid.
Ian, I think you probably have some thoughts on this. Maybe you should go next.
I was going to say that they're like a DeLorean because in some ways they're miles ahead in the future, and in some ways they're in 1954.
I like it.
Wow, good answer.
Future there.
I mean, many of the federal dams are much older than 1954, so that's my comment.
Okay, Guillory.
All right, here we go. Settle in. According to personality indications by car per Reader's Digest, Driver Automart, and HotCars.com, I think BPA would be a small black Toyota with sports team logos and exotic air fresheners. They're concerned about the environment. They're professional. And while their mission as a nonprofit public service federal power admin is to create and deliver the best value for their customers with cost-based rates, they are competitive and like to be the life of the party, set apart to establish themselves as the sole energy provider to the regions they serve. I think when we go back to this part, Paul will probably cut out all that and they'd be a small black Toyota car.
I'm really not sure what to think about this, considering you owned a small black Toyota, and I'm not sure if you're trying to say something about yourself here. Or...
Were you just driving your own car, Aaron?
I'm imagining everything Aaron said all on a single bumper sticker that's like the size of the back of the car.
They had thoughts about that too on these resources. I can send those to you guys after this.
One thing I'm certain of, whatever car it is, the manual is really, really long.
Very long. Yeah.
Okay, Paul.
So I think they are like one of those hybrid city buses, like for metro transport. That's really slow, can only go like on the single route, has to have like many processes to change any routes. But they're all like, anybody can get on board. Just pay your toll and you can get on board. And they would be a little bit too expensive. They'd be like, ooh, what? Can I just Uber? It seems like Uber would be cheaper than getting on the bus. And probably better.
I think it'd be more expensive because it's loaded full of lawyers.
Also,
they have all the BPA lawyers on there to find loopholes in their own contract.
That's a good point. Bureaucracy and lawyers.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go with the BPA would be a Tesla. They're groundbreaking, highly efficient, fun to drive. And this is mostly just in case I ever want to get a job at BPA. This is on the record.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to say that, or Brian just reread the question and thought about it off the cuff.
His first time reading the
All
question,
right.
he just said the first car he thought of.
Okay, next question comes from Roger Gray of PNGC. This is for Mark. He asks, what are you doing to prepare and position for 2028? And do you assume you will pretty much get a BPA contract and allocation similar to what you have today or something different?
Yeah, I don't see us walking away from BPA. It's still with, I understand that people are concerned about the pricing trajectory of BPA, but it's still the best game in town. It's firm, it's solid. I still think we get in pretty much the same allocation that we have. The only unknown for me is it going to include slice or not? Obviously, we're certainly pushing for that because it changes the dynamic of our rates if we go all block. So I think it's our general intent to stay with BPA, but do we stay for all of it or just most of it? Definitely for most of it. It just depends on what we see out there. It's available on a long-term basis that we may be able to get cheaper power.
I'll interject too. I think one of the things we are doing now to prepare is trying to collaborate, trying to build relationships now, because as I think a lot of you have heard me say before, those contract negotiations and leading up to 2028 is going to be very dependent on Public Power standing together, articulating pretty clearly what we want from Bonneville. So that's, I mean, part of why, we try to do these videos, try to get guests on from other organizations, is to try to maintain some community amongst Public Power so that we're positioned strongly together.
I think that wraps up all the questions. So with that, thanks for joining us today, Marc. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Next week, in what will finally be a new year, we will no longer be in 2020. Thank
goodness.
Yeah. We'll be back on the 7th. So send us any news, jobs, questions, or opinions you'd like us to share with our 13 subscribers. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications.
Here, wait. I got a special segment, special sneak segment. I promised a while ago that everybody gets a Dundee. So this year, our surprise segment is the Undies Awards, as presented by Public Power Underground, where everybody gets an award. Okay? So the first Undie is for Best Arin Host. Goes to Brian Fawcett. Congratulations, Brian.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't have done it without all your support.
Really good acceptance speech.
Congratulations, Brian.
Thanks, Marc.
Awesome job.
Okay, so the Undie Award for winner of many Banjolele Zoom duels goes to, you have a drum roll, please? Anybody got a drum roll? Ian Bledsoe. Congratulations.
All right.
Ian. Okay, next up we have the Undie Award, the Arin Reporter Award for fast reading, and it goes this year to Arin. Congratulations, Arin.
Oh my gosh, this is so unexpected. Thank you so much.
I kind of thought she would say it faster than that, though.
Thank you so much.
And lastly, the last Undie Award for the last guest of 2020, otherwise known as the ultimate guest of 2020, is for Marc Farmer. Congratulations, Marc.
Thank you. I am speechless.
Congratulations, everybody. I don't know. I didn't get him up there close enough so you could actually read them. I'll do it better next time.
Yeah, I'm going to cherish this forever.
We glimpse each other as pixels for old screen.
There you go.
Should old gatherings be
in true Michael Scott fashion,
forgotten,
what award did you give yourself? Like
yet?
best power manager ever or
Should
something
old
like
gatherings be forgot and old lang screen? And surely we will meet again, and surely greet happily, and link with colleagues now we see just with old lang screen.